you very much, everyone.
The President of FCEF and FCEF board members, the CEO of FCEF, Director ILO, thought I heard his name, but I haven't seen him. If he's here. Members of the organizing committee, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to say it's a pleasure to be here this morning to officiate at the opening of TOPEX 2013 in place of the Prime Minister, who unfortunately is not able to be with us. And I'd like to congratulate FCEF for being able to organize TOPEX this year, because it's come to be an event that people look forward to every year, and it's a forum for top executives in both the public and private sector to meet, to learn new things, to establish new relationships, and this is a great time for reflection. Oh, there he is. This year's TOPEX has the theme, Inclusive Business Growth, Partnerships Beyond 2014. The theme is timely, it's very timely, because if there's one thing that we need in this country, it's to ensure that we are successful and that we are sustainable. It is that we need business to grow, that we create more wealth, not just for the sake of wealth, but so that we can build a better Fiji. It's not enough to just have growth. We must have growth that is inclusive. We must have growth that impacts on the lives of many people, not just on the lives of a few people. The economic review for August, issued by the Reserve Bank of Fiji, forecast that we are going to get growth of around 3.2% this year. The RBF report also notes that the employment prospects are improving, as gauged by the RBF Job Advancement Survey, an increase of 12.9%, and that there is increased business and investor confidence, noticed in RBF's June Business Expectation Survey. So things are looking good for the short to medium term. I believe, and government believes, that Fiji's future lies in its inclusivity. I believe that Fiji will be sustainable and successful in the long term if we are an inclusive country. Over the past few years, we have witnessed what has happened in Tunisia, in Egypt, and a few other countries. They have all been places where there has been some appearance of inclusivity, but in fact society was deeply divided. In such places, people have revolted for more inclusive societies, for more of the population to enjoy the benefits of growth, to move away from strong extractive relationships where small portions of the population capture a disproportionate percentage of wealth created. There are lessons in this for all of us here. If people from all segments of our society are brought into the mainstream of activities, and if they can benefit through economic activity, if everyone in Fiji can become part of a national partnership for the benefit of the nation, we will have a stronger, sustainable country. A successful Fiji, a sustainable Fiji will be realized through inclusivity and partnership between business and government, with labor and employees, with the marginalized, the informal and the formal sector. I'd like to share with you some of the learnings I learned recently from a book that I was reading. It's called Why Nations Fail, The Origins of Power, Prosperity and Poverty. And it's by two academics. One is called Darren Asamoglu, I think that's how they pronounce his name. He's a professor at MIT. And a person called James Robinson, who is a professor at Harvard University. The book explores and tries to explain the causes of poverty and why nations eventually fail. It looks at all the great civilization and looks in detail at what has happened in the various empires that have had control of vast parts of the earth during the past. It looks also at why countries or different parts of the same region can differ so much in how they have progressed. Some have lasted, and others have done well, while others have fallen by the wayside. And it notes some of the reasons that have been suggested as to why some succeed and others don't. And one of the first reasons that comes up, people talks about geography. For instance, some countries are seen to be more naturally endowed than others. Obviously, those with more resources in this kind of thinking would be more successful than those without those resources. The second view is about cultural attributes. Some countries or some group or some places, they just have more of those cultural attributes that allow them to be more productive. Some cultures have a great work ethic, whilst others do not. The third view that has become predominant around the world over the past few decades is that in many countries, rulers do not know what is needed for economic success. So to make a country prosperous, and if only the rulers would get this right, if only they would accept advice from the right advisors, then prosperity would follow. This is obviously one of the main arguments behind accepting the IMF and the World Bank view of how a country should develop. The book that I'm referring to, however, It argues that whilst all of these factors are important, they are not the critical factor. It argues that the reasons countries are poor is because many countries are ruled by a narrow elite that have organized society for their own benefit at the expense of the vast majority of people. Political power has been narrowly concentrated and has been used to create great wealth for those who possess it. It gives the example of the former president of Egypt, Mubarak, whom some reports estimate amassed a fortune in the vicinity of 70 billion. It notes that countries like the United States and Great Britain became rich because they were able to change the way that power was controlled politically. They were able to create a society where government was accountable to citizens and where a great mass of people could take advantage of economic opportunities. The argument is that the reason Britain is richer than, say, Egypt or Fiji, for that matter, is because in 1688, England had a revolution that transformed the politics and thus the economics of the nation. People fought for and won more political rights, and they used them to expand their economic opportunities. This eventually led to the Industrial Revolution. The same thing has happened in other parts of the world. The argument is powerful and it is persuasive. It states that it is inequality itself which leads to poverty. And conversely, that if a poor country wants to become rich, it must undergo a political transformation. This is an argument that makes more and more sense to me the more I think about it. This is why the events that have been happening in Fiji bode well for our future. We have just put in place a new constitution where for the first time every citizen of this country is treated as an equal, while at the same time recognizing the special standing of Itoke, Rutumans, and Banabans. We have put in place a new constitution that provides for the first time ever a host of socio-economic rights that have never even been part of our previous constitutions. Our new constitution is more inclusive than any other constitution we've ever had before this. The Prime Minister had this to say during the signing of the Constitution, and I quote, "For the first time, Fiji meets the standards of the world's great democracies and joins their ranks. We now have a constitution that meets the test of a genuine democracy that upholds the legal and moral basis of a common and equal citizenry without losing individuality and culture," end quote. Political institutions create a climate that develops the kind of economic institutions that allow for the growth of wealth and the spread of wealth. Yes, economic institutions are critical for determining whether a country is poor or rich, but it is politics and political institutions that determine what economic institutions a country has. It is the political institutions that create that right climate. The intent of the Bainimarama government is clear. It is not focused on bringing the maximum benefits to just one group of people, to one ethnic group, or to one class of society. It is focused on putting in place an environment that allows the whole country to grow. It is focused on removing corruption and cronyism. It has put in place institutions to see to this. It has established a track record of taking action. It has taken action on things that leaders have done in the past, which people talked about as not being quite ethical, but which were thought to be too difficult to try and rectify. The Bainimarama government has addressed these issues head-on. It has not shirked these tasks. It has also not shirked the challenge of dealing with subjects, with individuals, and even with institutions that were thought to be sacrosanct and virtually untouchable. The intent is clear. Yes, we must respect differences. We must respect the unique aspects of our nations, but these differences must not be used to drive us apart. We must not allow institutions to be usurped by politically elitist views of how things should or should not happen. We must not allow such institutions to reinforce particular viewpoints that are not to the best interests of the nation at large. The government has removed the ethnic barriers that separated us in the past. It has removed the fears on land and culture that were periodically fanned up during elections as aspiring politicians aspired to use the race card to get into parliament. The Constitution now addresses this specifically, and it is no longer an issue. Itoke land can never be taken away. It is protected. At the same time, it has put in place mechanisms to make land available to those who wish to use it for productive purposes. The Constitution also ensures, for the first time ever, that traditional landowners will be able to benefit from the share of royalties of any mineral resources found on their land. This is historic. It has never been there. It is not there with the Alliance government, the Labour government, the SVT, the SDL, any other previous government. Through this provision, landowners are being included. They are being given a share of the process. There is greater inclusivity. The Constitution has created a political system that has a single constituency for the whole country that forces aspiring members of parliament to look at the interests of everyone in the country to get into parliament. It requires us all to care about everybody else. At the same time, the Bainimarama government has gone out of its way to create an environment which encourages investment and business growth. Taxation rates for corporations have been reduced. Personal taxations have been reduced, making available more money for disposable income and to raise demand. Tax-free zones developed with tax holidays to ensure that there is a higher likelihood of success. For the first time in Fiji's history, government has set aside so much of its budget for infrastructure development that will in turn boost development and investment. There is now more and focused attention on building new roads, of improving our airports, of building new jetties and wharves. At the same time, the most marginalized in society have not been forgotten. There has been an emphasis on providing assistance to those unable to fend for themselves. Assistance through social welfare, assistance with bus fares, meals, pensions for the old, training and educational opportunities, and even the writing off of housing loans. It is the political institutions that have done all this that are achieving results in developing a more inclusive society. These developments will translate into economic benefits over the long term if these trends are maintained, if we maintain consistency. That is the hope and the prayer that we will maintain this course after a democratically elected government has been put in place. Fiji's economic future will depend in the long term on our maintaining this course of inclusivity. Let me turn now to the role of business and private sector and why I believe it must regard inclusivity as something critical, not just for Fiji, but also for the success of your own business ventures. When we have societies that are not inclusive, it leads to conflict and turmoil. That is never good for business. An inclusive society has less conflict and encourages long-term growth. Yes, it is the business of business to generate growth, to generate profits, to create wealth. Business obviously creates jobs, and this puts wealth and wages and salaries into people's pockets. It distributes wealth. I would contend here this morning that business and top executives need to see their role also as being more than just about creating profits, but to also see that part of their role is to enhance inclusivity, to grow inclusivity, and that as we grow inclusivity, we grow a better Fiji, a more sustainable Fiji. Over the past few years, I've been glad to see the rise in corporate philanthropy and corporate social responsibility. This is indeed pleasing. Now the challenge is to raise this to another level. How can our organizations become much more inclusive? How can we bring the most marginalized into your value chain so that they too can benefit? How can we be more inclusive of those with physical disabilities? Section 84 of the Employment Relations Promulgation states that an employer who employs 50 or more workers may employ physically disabled persons on a ratio of at least 2% of the total number of workers employed by the employer. We thank those organizations that are doing something about this, and I hope more will follow suit. How can we be more inclusive for all ethnic groups? 2 weeks ago, I visited a building site here in Nadi. There are two different companies, this building site. I drove past one of the companies, all the workers were Itoke. I drove past the other company, all the workers were Indo-Fijians. So it struck me, how can this be? How can we have companies that are comprised entirely of one ethnic group? That's something that we need to look at in our own organizations. I challenge you all to look deep within your own organizations and ask yourself, if this is true for your organizations, what will you do about it? The world over today, there is a focus on the MDGs. I was in fact in Bangkok recently on a meeting to discuss the response of the Asia-Pacific region on the development of a new set of goals, the SDGs, to take over from the MDGs post-2015. I suggest that if we want to make Fiji a more inclusive country, then we need to explore new business models that assist achievement of MDGs, commercial success and development impact at the same time, fighting poverty while meeting commercial targets. I have been particularly impressed by what is being done by Friends and also the work done by Pure Fiji in working with local communities to make paper. Inclusive business integrates low-income people into their value chain, and I hope that more of such initiatives can be put into place. One of the hallmarks of our labor market at the moment is the large group of young, well-educated youth who do not have employment at present. This is something that is not unique to Fiji, but something that is happening around the world. One of the ways that we are addressing this in my ministry is through the National Employment Center. One of the important roles of the NEC, as we like to call it, is to partner with organizations in Fiji to take on these young unemployed on attachments to grow their skills and to give them work experience. We try to meet half the cost of their $60 per week allowances, but my ministry has limited funds for this. I invite you all, if you are not involved in the scheme, to consider becoming part of the scheme, and to consider also meeting the full $60 per week allowance on your own so that even more young unemployed can participate. There are two last points that I'd like to make that I must add about inclusivity and the private sector's role. First of all, that we need greater inclusivity in the way all organizations work with and interact with their own employees. Inclusivity through good faith relationship with our workers, with our staff. I won't spend any more time talking about that because it shall be the focus of a presentation that I shall give later on this morning. Last thing that I'd like to mention, what we need in this country is inclusivity by creating more jobs, by economic growth that is coupled with job creation. We must create jobs, not just wealth, because we need people to benefit from the growth. We want people to have wages and salaries so that they can look after their own needs, so that they can pay taxes, and thus assist government to carry out its own responsibilities. So as opportunities present themselves for further growth, please make it a priority that such growth be as job-rich as possible. As we gather for these 2 days of sharing ideas, of learning, of creating new friends, I am hopeful for the future of Fiji. I invite you to share my belief that a successful Fiji, a sustainable Fiji, is only possible through an inclusive Fiji. That an inclusive Fiji will benefit every citizen in the long run. It will benefit our country in the long run. It will benefit my grandchildren and your grandchildren, and it is the best way to make Fiji really the way the world should be. Ladies and gentlemen, with these thoughts and words, TOPEX 2013 with the theme Inclusive Business Growth Partnerships Beyond 2014 is now declared open.